Hello and welcome to another Analysis Behind the News, where we provide the perspective that you can use to help save American liberty and independence. George Soros, the radical billionaire leftist who funds many left-wing policies around the globe, wrote an online op-ed last week lamenting a potential collapse of the European Union. Now, the New American reported on this and called Mr. Soros' article an obituary of the European Union. Mr. Soros wrote, "Europe is sleepwalking into oblivion, and the people of Europe need to wake up before it is too late. If they don't, the European Union will go the way of the Soviet Union in 1991. Neither our leaders nor ordinary citizens seem to understand that we are experiencing a revolutionary moment. The next inflection point will be the elections of the European Parliament in May 2019. Unfortunately, anti-European forces will enjoy a competitive advantage in the balloting. There are several reasons for this, including the outdated party system that prevails in most European countries, the practical impossibility of treaty change, and the lack of legal tools for disciplining member states that violate the principles on which the European Union was founded." Now, the New American translated this as, "Citizens are waking up to the personal and political liberty they lost when they traded it for the promise of an improved economy." Well, let's explore this a little bit. So, keeping in mind that trade agreements played a key role in developing the European Union, when we dig into the past of Mr. Soros, we find that he has supported trade agreements that the globalist elite like himself favor in dismantling the sovereignty of countries in order to shackle them into a regional union. Of course, many Republicans have done this same thing, but Mr. Soros has committed many millions of dollars to this cause. The Republicans and many Democrats jump on board these trade agreements because of the promise of an improved economy. Yet, this improved economy only comes to those large, conglomerate globalist corporations that have no qualms about trading American sovereignty for cheap labor, more business, and a near monopoly in some instances due to the trading rules that weed out most of their smaller competitors. So let us speculate for a moment that Mr. Soros has no interest in protecting the sovereignty of individual countries. Well, in fact, we don't necessarily need to speculate because he has more or less stated this in his book, The Crisis of Global Capitalism. He wrote, "The sovereignty of states must be subordinated to international law and international institutions." In the same book, he also wrote, "To stabilize and regulate a truly global economy, we need some global system of political decision-making." Now, this comes to us from The Blaze. Now, in another of his books, he stated, "The main obstacle to a stable and just world order is the United States." That's telling in and of itself. Finally, he wrote in another book, "The main enemy of the open society, I believe, is no longer the communist, but the capitalist threat." Now, in this instance, he's pointing back to after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, he's pointing to what he considers the dangers of the unfettered free market, which has made him billions. And yet, this is someone who favors trade agreements. For someone who thinks of sovereignty as an obstacle to get around, who works toward globalism, indeed a new world order, do you think his support of trade agreements should call into serious question why the GOP is advocating the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement and other trade agreements for that matter? Listen, the reason Mr. Soros is lamenting a dying European Union is because he knows that if the EU structure collapses, then other unions around the world will follow. It will set back the globalist timetable of achieving world government by untold decades. And we have just produced a Slim Jim that points out 7 things that the average Americans does not know is hidden within the USMCA. Now, to ensure that we haven't made this up, the corresponding chapter of the agreement is noted. So let's just dive into this, shall we? Number 1, USMCA grants migrant workers labor protections. That's in Chapter 17. In Chapter 23, this allows an unlimited number of such workers. Again, Chapter 23 dictates employer regulations such as LGBTQ policies. The USMCA also will allow for economic integration of North America. You'll find that in Chapter 26. There's also U.S. submission to global bodies. That's in Chapter 30. Also in Chapter 30, there are layers of unaccountable global bureaucracy that are introduced. And number 7, also in Chapter 30, is the ability to change the agreement without Congress. Now, as we state on here, our Constitution created limited government with few and defined powers. But the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement ignores the Constitution and American liberties, plows over American independence, and leads to international control. And on the back, it says, worst of all, it sets up an EU-style North American Union. The socialist European Union has been a disaster. Economic integration leads to political integration. A country that loses control over its economy loses control over its sovereignty. A country can recover from economic downturn, but it's nearly impossible to recover lost sovereignty, just like what we're talking about with the UK and Brexit. So the North American integration through USMCA expands what NAFTA started, and there's 4 points on that. And we list number 1, loss of American independence. Number 2, merger with Mexico and Canada. Number 3, Congress rubber stamping international regulations. And number 4, it's a stepping stone to regional and world government. And it says here, America first would become America last in a North American Union. So do you stand with George Soros and the globalist elites in creating a new world order? Or do you stand with American liberty and independence? Tell Congress and President Trump today that the USMCA and NAFTA both need to go. Now, links are in the video description, so we ask that you please like and share this video with others. And until next time, we'll see you then.